This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
Someone or some group has figured out a process for abducting and disposing of more than 100 bodies in recent years. Young men, not usually a target group for serial killers. This has been taking place over the last 20 years in the U.S., the U.K., and Europe, all found near bodies of water, but not drowned, and many found with a smiley face drawn on a surface nearby. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. We're continuing with our series of programs drawn from our archives. Again, as I'm recording this, it is prior to our Israel trip. As you're watching this, we have returned home to the United States, recovering from jet lag, and we'll be back with a new and newly recorded program next week as the Iron and Myth series returns. But this week, going back into the archives 5 years for a program that, because at the time we were just experimenting with video and our YouTube channel really hadn't caught on yet, I think it's a program that needs to get more attention. Our guest is a researcher who digs into some really, frankly, unpleasant topics, but topics that we as Christians should not avoid. He is the producer-director of a documentary called The Smiley Face Killers, and we welcome back to the program from the archives from 2018, William Ramsey.
Derek, it's an honor to be here. It's great to be here with you in person.
Well, it's and we're glad you're also part of a project we can't talk about right now because we're not at liberty to disclose just yet. But that will be something people will find coming later this year from the group here at Skywatch TV. But the Smiley Face Killers. I remember when this came out, and it was. I don't remember why we didn't talk about it. I'm not sure I was still back in a regular schedule of producing A View from the Bunker at that point. Still trying to get my handle on a schedule, which you saw my calendar in the office there. You can see why. Yeah, we're just a little busy around here. Yeah. But still, this is something that needs more attention. It's something that crossed our radar, Sharon's and mine, regarding the when we were doing PID radio some years back. Young men who were mysteriously turning up dead in bodies of water around the upper Midwest. And you dug into this and found that there are more victims, as many as 100 victims.
Correct.
That than we were aware of. We were aware of maybe a dozen or so at the time, and we never found out how or never followed. It kind of fell off our radar. But this is shocking.
It's really incredible that there is a pattern of young men disappearing at night, being missing for 7, 10 days, sometimes 30 days, and then being found in water. And it's not just happening in the United States. It's happening in the UK, in Europe, places in Australia. I've documented cases like this in Thailand. And the Vimeo movie that I have on Vimeo, Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and murdering young men in the US and UK, is available now. But it goes into the cases, I think, in the most detail that any other kind of researcher has looked into. I actually take video files from local TV that have recorded these missing young men, and I show, I think, in my opinion, conclusively that they were not accidentally drowned, or they didn't drown accidentally, but they were met with misadventure, and that they were abducted, and that them being found in water is a form of body disposal.
So what period of time are we talking about here? Over what range of years?
That's a great question. They've noticed there was one victim by the name of McNeil in New York they call or reference as Victim Zero, and that was a case that happened in, I believe, 1998. So it's been about 20 years that they've documented cases like this. And the first cases were really documented by two guys, Gannon and Gilbertson. Gannon was a retired policeman from New York who noticed that there was a pattern involving young men, and also he teamed up with a professor with the last name Gilbertson, and they wrote a book together called Case Studies in Drowning Forensics.
Kind of a mundane title for something this dark.
Great. That's a good comment, because they had a very academic, forensic approach to these cases. And the book itself is hard to get into. I find it to be very detailed on dates, times, and the amounts of drugs, but they actually detail that many of these young men did not die within the days that they supposedly disappeared, and also that many had the presence of GHB in their bodies.
No, what is GHB?
GHB is a drug. It's actually found in your system in small amounts, but it's gamma hydroxy butylate or something. But in larger doses, it causes individuals to lose body functioning and put you into a kind of state where you lose your memory. So GHB is, I think, has been used as a date rape drug, and it's or commonly used mostly men drugging women.
Huh. So GHB is in boy, not GHB.
GHB is in boy. That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah, that's something that I was introduced to the term roofie here within the last year or so, because a family member was apparently dosed with it unwittingly, and thankfully no harm, which is surprising, because this person, and I don't want to identify male or female, but wandered about a major American city in the middle of the night in what is not one of the greatest neighborhoods in that city, and thankfully was preserved from harm by
divine hand.
By divine hand,
very,
because
very lucky, yeah.
So anyway, this is something that is
well, I would say that these
interest.
cases are part of that pattern. So part of this drugging pattern, rohypnol or roofies is one drug that's used to sedate people, and also GHB is another.
Okay,
Same kind of function.
Now, again, I mentioned young men here, young athletic men. What are some of the common characteristics among these 100? Because it seems like you're not exactly. This wouldn't be a target group.
I would agree. I think that at the first blush, people would look at this and not kind of realize that this is a target pool. But I think all these young men, almost to a T, have. It's almost like they're very athletic, healthy. Some people have used the terms BMI, body mass index. Like there's almost nobody like me who's even slightly overweight. They're all super healthy. So I think that is why they're in that pool, the pool of victims.
So young men, what's the range of ages?
All the way just from college age. So I would say 19. The most cases are somewhere in a pool between 19 and 28, although there are some older, maybe younger, 32. But even those are included in, I've included some of those in my documentary, but largely it's college age, I would say. So in the trailer to your film, which is available at Vimeo, and I'll put a link in the notes, whether you're watching this at youtube.com/Derek Gilbert or listening to this on Stitcher, Spreaker, or at the website VFTB.net. The show notes at VFTB.net will have the link to the film at Vimeo. Mentioned one victim who was coming out of a Boston Celtics game. That's correct. That's Kelleher last, I guess, 2017. That's a very recent case.
Wow.
Disappeared downtown Boston. There was another young man in the same area of where the Boston, I think it's BD Arena or one of the arenas down there. His name was Hurley. So both Hurley and Kelleher walked out and disappeared. Hurley was one of the early cases where his girlfriend was going to pick him up. He was on the phone with her, and he disappeared. Both Hurley and Kelleher were found later in the Charles River, which actually Kelleher had crossed the Charles River and gone to Paul Revere Park, where his phone records show that he was trying to tag or get into an Uber. So, and that's unfortunately, in some of these cases, a correlation or connection to some of these cases is Uber drivers or people trying to get into an Uber. And there was, in Pittsburgh, there was an attempted abduction of a young man by an Uber driver. This was a year ago.
Now the young man, Kelleher, was on the phone with his girlfriend, or was it the Hurley?
It was Hurley. Hurley was on the phone with his girlfriend.
Okay, because I guess what I'm trying to figure out here is the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. He was picking them up because they were he was meeting them through homosexual clubs or wherever, however they connected in the Milwaukee area. But if Hurley was texting or trying to get in touch with his girlfriend or speaking to her, it doesn't seem that would be how he was chosen as a victim. So what's the common thread in terms of how these are being selected? And is there another question that comes to mind?
racial component? I mean, are these all young white men, or
it's mostly young white men? Although there have been some Latinos and African Americans, but I would say the general pool is white young men. But there's been speculation that some of these hunters, and this can happen in heterosexual crimes as well, is going to a very busy place and looking for people alone who might be tipsy or something like that. So Hurley could have been one of those things where he was lost in a crowd, and same with Keller. But there's been other cases. There was a case in Pittsburgh, Jimmy Slack, who came out of a music venue and disappeared. And I show him in the video. One of the remarkable things about his case is he was found in the river where that had already been checked, like many of these cases. And this is why or I can tell that something fishy is happening, is that many of the young men's bodies is found in places that have already been checked or recently been checked. Dakota James, for example, was found in an area had just been checked 2 days before. So he suddenly appeared, and some of his family members said that his body was in very good shape. So he was missing for 39 days. So why was his body in good shape, and why was he found in a place
clearly
that
not
checked?
Yeah, clearly not decaying for 39 days.
Correct.
So something was going on during that period. Oh, that's even more horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible. So typically a human body, when it enters water, at the very end of 20 days is when the body will surface. So typically it surfaces within 3 or 4 days, just the way a body decomposes. 20 days at the very end, even if it's super cold. So if it's beyond 20 days, then something is amiss. But there are elements of these cases that are all very similar. GHB is involved in some of the cases. Music or sports venues are involved in the cases. Young men on dating apps, and some of these young men are in gay bars. But I'm glad you brought up Jeffrey Dahmer. That's a really great connection, because those cases are similar, I believe, in these types of cases where Jeffrey Dahmer was targeting a specific group of people. Most of I think of all of his victims, maybe one were African American, and then he would bring them back to his place and drug them. So I think that there's this same MO, just like you talked about in the intro, that is something with these cases where many of these men are sought out at certain places, are also drugged. Yeah.
The selecting of men coming out of a venue, a sporting event, or a concert where they're surrounded by people can create, I would think, a false sense of security then. Because, you're coming out of a Celtics game, you got 20,000 people around you coming out at the same time. Coming out of a concert, probably about the same number. I've never felt particularly unsafe coming out of a St. Louis Cardinals game. Years and years we lived in St. Louis, and the thought that somebody can reach into a crowd with that many people around you and pull you out, never to be seen again, and you never ever see again. This is horrifying, especially young adult men. I mean, we would think older people, children, being far more vulnerable. What is it that over the past 17, 20 years, past 20 years, nearly 5 a year?
Yeah, if not more. Yeah.
That we know about.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. Young men who you would think would be the hardest to abduct. Guys who are athletic, physically fit, presumably aware, you would think. Although, remembering what I was like when I was like 19, 20 and thinking that I was going to live forever.
Likewise.
Maybe that's the vulnerability.
False sense of safety.
Yeah.
I think that may be one of the common elements of all of these cases, is a false sense that you're in a safe situation. So how somebody can disappear out of these crowds, I think, is remarkable. But there was a case out of Virginia where there was a heterosexual killer who would go into crowds, and he had found a couple women, and the way that he lured them was just by simply talking to them, and was it. And I can't remember the name of the case, but the mother was interviewed recently, and yeah, that was something that was very similar, I think, to these cases where somebody can just have a chat. So not all of the victims have been in a bar or been drugged, but there's a significant amount that have.
Okay. Well, now let's get to the name of the film, The Smiley Face Killers. What is the deal with the smiley face?
All of these cases, when they were first researched, the researchers Gannon and Gilbertson, there was another woman, Christy Peel. Oftentimes there would be a smiley face that was sprayed and paint sprayed or something near the scene of the crime. And that's what initially piqued my interest in these cases, was the smiley face. I was doing research on my book, Children of the Beast, about Aleister Crowley's influence on the 20th century, and the smiley face kept popping up in different areas. It popped up particularly in Alan Moore's books, The Watchmen.
Right.
And it's just popped up in common culture. And I actually have a segment about how often the smiley face is used in common culture, in art, and in clothing styles, and in the movies. And what it led me back to was a lot of acid house music and the occult culture undergirding the acid house music, people who were involved in it. And I named those names in the documentary. But there also is, in those environments, there was a strong current of homosexuality. Mm-hmm. So I find that the connection actually even goes back to William Burroughs, who I believe was a great influence. And one of the interesting things about, like, for example, Kurt Cobain uses the smiley face in their insignia. Kurt Cobain wrote music with William Burroughs. And so you'll see this, and if you watch the documentary, you see this kind of seeding of this idea of the smiley face, which I believe has an occult meaning. And it's described in Alan Moore's Watchmen, that the comedian who is this main character on the intro commits crimes and thinks that it's all just a big joke. Mm-hmm. So I believe that that's the meaning of the smiley face. Now, it's not associated with all the cases. They haven't been found in all the cases. Typically, they're found in an area where they think the body was put into water, but it is a commonality in cases. Todd Geib out of Michigan. There was another guy. There's another guy out of Philadelphia where they found the smiley faces. Zach Marr had a smiley face on a trash can nearby. So it seems like that there is this correlation of the smiley face. There was another case out of Bath or Bristol with Deacon Wilkins where after he was seen walking very, very calmly on surveillance video at night, disappeared, was found in a body of water that had just been previously checked. And then when his body was found, somebody found a smiley face up, spray painted against the side of the wall. So
that had not been there previously.
Correct.
Huh? Yeah.
So I have had the benefit and luck of having people sending me research from literally all over the world. It's been really amazing because once I kind of put these videos out, I really preliminary put out individual videos about individuals who had disappeared. So people started sending me cases and information. So it was almost like public source research for this case, in which my video is very long. The movie is 3.5. It's probably too long, but I have a ton of information in there. It's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah, it's difficult when you're doing work like this because you don't want to do disservice to any of the victims by leaving anything out, and you want to present all of the evidence and research to the viewers as well. But yeah, it can be difficult trying to decide what to cut when you're making a film. I've not done that yet, but even in a 30-minute episode, I can find it really difficult to turn in the span of trying to give a presentation an hour and a half when I've got 5 hours worth of material. What do I cut and leave out? And I'm not talking about stuff quite anywhere near this dark. Alan Moore, William Burroughs, Kurt Cobain, lead singer of the rock band Nirvana. Moore, the author of The Watchmen, 300, a number of other things.
From Hell. About Masonic murders, Jack the Ripper.
Which raises a question. This occurred to me while you're talking about the spray painting of the smiley face near the victim in Bristol. One of the aspects of the, and I wish Sharon was here because she has this information top of mind because she is writing all of this into her series, The Red Wing Saga, using the premise that those murders, the ones ascribed to the Ripper, and a number of murders that are not considered canonical, but were probably conducted by somebody, whoever the Ripper was, or some group, and this is the premise of her novels, that it was a group doing these for ritual purposes. But there were things written on walls near a couple of the crime scenes. In one case, the Jews will not be blamed for nothing. The word Jews misspelled, but and other things that are not as well known by the general public. But it occurs to me that this is something where you almost have something, the spirit behind whoever's committing the crime or the spirit committing the crime, laughing at us.
Kind of a big joke, yes. I agree. I think it's interesting you keyed in on that. And also there are similarities like that, the Ripper case, to these, where one case was this Booth guy's name I couldn't remember before outside of Philadelphia, where he was found in a river that had been checked and rechecked and checked again, And when he was found, there was writing on a wall that was very close to the body, maybe 20 feet, including a smiley face, but also this kind of hyper sigil, like something that was there that insiders would know, but the general public would have no clue about it.
And this victim was it Manayunk, Pennsylvania?
No, that was another guy. That was Shane Montgomery, which was fairly close to that, actually. But one of the interesting things about Booth is that his family believed that he got caught up in some type of cult activity with a group of people he didn't want to be around. And he had told his parents that, he didn't really want to get involved in this. And the writers, Gannon and Gilbertson, surmised that he was murdered due to either not getting involved in the cult or exposing that cult. And that's another case where it's pretty clear that he was abducted and kept for a time somewhere, because I think that Gannon and Gilbertson conclusively show that he was only dead for like 48 hours and he was missing for 8 days.
Oh, wow. Well, again, that hits kind of close to home because I worked in Philadelphia, close to that area, close to Manayunk, actually, just across the Schuylkill River over in Ballackinwood back in 86, 87, prior to these events. But, it's always a little strange when you're familiar with the physical setting of an area in which something like this has taken place. Alan Moore is known to be an occultist. What is the significance of him using that smiley face as an emblem? In fact, it's part of the official logo, the official
blood on the smiley face,
blood on the smiley face, because that was one of the comedian's symbols.
Right,
and the comedian
was right here on his lapel, so it's on his left side, right here.
Right, and his death is sort of the MacGuffin.
Right.
That starts the plot of The Watchmen.
Right.
And so that's one of the symbols, trademarked, I think, logo of The Watchmen. And the graphic novel and also the movie.
Right, and the comedian has a smiley face on his gun, so his weapon is associated with it. And like I talked about earlier, that's where he explains, I believe that's what the meaning of the smiley face is, that it's all universe. And Crowley even said this too, Aleister Crowley. The universe is a big cosmic joke, and you should just laugh and have joy in it, and I think that also detaches you from normal morality. So I believe that's why that's in Alan Moore. But I'd studied Alan Moore, and he has said that he's really half a writer and half an occultist. So he spends the same time writing as he is an occult, and he suffuses a lot of his novels. He usually does the writing for the novels, not so much the art, but he suffuses all types of occult references and knowledge throughout all of his books, whether the lesser known ones, Promethea, From Hell, The Watchmen's probably the most famous, but
I'm going to have to read these others now.
Yeah, so he's a very remarkable person who is also associated in that kind of demimonde underground in the UK. The occult underground has a lot of associations, actually.
Interesting. The Amazon was just done a series that Sharon and I have been watching because we think it's funny, which is a live-action version of the old cartoon series The Tick from Fox 20 years ago. Well done. The writing's actually very well done, but there's a scene toward the end where the villain, who's this guy who terrorized the world back in the 50s, and he's come back, the terror, and he's 112 years old or something, but he's still, and again, the series is comic, and yet there are some elements in it that are less so. It's not played as broadly for laughs as the comic, as the cartoon was, or as the live action series that they produced, like 13 episodes for Fox back in 2001. Anyway, there's a scene toward the end where one of the protagonists, the everyman Arthur, who wants to become a superhero because he saw the terror kill his father and his heroes, a group of superheroes, right in front of him when he was a kid. And the terror, this basically is given this protagonist, Arthur, his reason for living. His whole purpose of living was to prove that the terror really wasn't dead and he was still out there, and I'm going to prove it someday and turn him over, and he'll see justice done. Well, he finally, through a series of, destiny, really, brings him face to face with the terror, and he realizes that and the terror says this in the same sense as Alan Moore, or Aleister Crowley rather, and I'm wondering if the writers of the series are aware of Crowley's views on this, because the terror says, "Don't you get it, kid? There is no destiny," and I'm paraphrasing, but life is just a musical comedy.
Yeah.
and I'm the only one making it rhyme.
Wow.
And
It's that same philosophical position.
But to their credit, the protagonist, this kid Arthur, who's like accountant, and he's on his meds because he sees things, and he's got delusions that the terror. Everybody knows he's dead, and we got to keep him under control because he'll have another break. And finally, he says, "No, you're wrong. You can kill me, but it doesn't matter because right is right." And so they kind of reject that. But I thought it was interesting hearing that. And because I heard the same thing in a very different context, because again, The Tick it's a comic series. You can, a couple of bad words here and there, but you can watch it without, getting really depressed, because the good guys win. And there are plenty of laughs in it. But that's an interesting view that, nothing matters. And so just
it's kind of a big joke.
Yeah. And even these dark rituals where people or other living creatures, animals, are being horribly tortured. It's all just a joke. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Wow.
I think that is a real position of the left-hand path, dark side.
Wow.
It's not serious. The universe is a joke.
Wow.
And I think that Moore also wrote The Killing Joke with the Joker. And there he is with a big smile, right? Laughing the whole time.
Yeah.
So you see this kind of, it's a big joke theme, not just in Moore, but in the popular culture. And you see that smiley face. It's in like movies like It, which involved this creature smiling while he was killing. At the very intro of the new movie It, you can see one of the kids draw a little smiley face on a window in, the what does he call it? The smoke or whatever. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So the people are putting it in there. Yeah.
So again, when we get a 20-year period of time and victims spread from Washington State to the UK, Upper Midwest, New England,
Canada. Some in Spain. There's one in Spain. Some in France, maybe.
So is this just a work of copycats? I mean, because it doesn't seem plausible that this would be the work of one person who's been getting away with it over such a wide area. I suppose it's possible, but it seems implausible. But is it just copycats, or is there something more organized here?
Well, that's an excellent question. And my conclusion was that this was a learned MO through dark web or fetish sites, that they learned that this was something somebody could do to get away with, maybe even make the perfect murder. And that's what I believe. So I don't believe it's one individual. I don't believe it's one group, but I do believe that there's a strong current of dark web, FetLife, fetish community that is involved. There was one case that happened in Georgia. A guy by the name of Naz Muhammad Rahimi was found in a lake, and people around him were all involved in this very dark community that involved occultism, fetishization, gay homosexual bars. And he was actually from Perth, Australia, and some of his friends in Perth, Australia sent me stuff, said, "We never believed this story." And I told them, I don't believe the story either. So I do believe that through some type of networking, in any interest group has its own ways, in my opinion. And I think these cases have taken place in the advent of the internet and of people traveling to and fro across the earth.
Yeah.
So I think that is an important way to look at this, is that people are communicating through websites or through even emails, or just people are understanding and traveling.
Yeah.
And I think that is why these cases all look the same. It's somebody's telling people how to do it.
Well, yeah, but it's one thing to read about how to do this or get explanation via a video on the dark web or something, but it's something else again when you're actually trying to do this for the first time. One of the I showed you a video earlier of my barbershop quartet, and one of the reasons we practiced a couple of times a week is because we learned finally that the old saying "practice makes perfect" isn't quite correct. It's perfect practice makes perfect. If you're practicing it the wrong way, you're not getting it right. But if you don't practice at all, you have no clue. I mean, you may have read the instructions. Okay, you dose them with this, you do this, you maneuver them here. Make sure you don't leave any physical traces, this, that, or the other. Don't use your phone. Don't do this. I mean, it seems to me that at some point, at some point, somebody in one of these 100 or so cases would have done something that authorities could use to get a thread, a handle on one of them and start unraveling this whole thing. And yet that has not happened.
I agree. And it's remarkable because, and I go through one case where they caught a man in England that he was seen on CCTV with his victims that he drugged. And his body, the way he disposed of the bodies was he put him in a church yard that was close to him. And after the third or fourth, the police are like, something's going on. Well, it was through the persistence of his family of going through and looking through, we want the CCTV video of this. They found, who's this man with my brother? And it was the family that pushed it. And then they traced it back to the man. They realized that all of his stories were baloney. And he was convicted of the murder of 4 young men. And I show all of this in my documentary. But what unraveled is that he was involved in drugging people for years and involved in this gay underground, and he had practiced stuff, and some lived and some didn't. And the police themselves had to go back through and look at all of these other cases of people who've been drugged. And they actually were uprated by, I forgot somebody, in the downtown metropolitan London for messing up and really bungling a case that should have been obvious, cases that should have been obvious for the serial killer.
Now, they're seeing some of that right now in the cases of the sexual abuse scandals that are coming out in Rotherham and Rochdale, and Telsbury is the one that was just announced this week as we record this on March the 13th. The one in Telford may be the biggest in the UK history, as many as 1,000 girls going back over 40 years. Now, this is a different type of crime, but these were girls who were being groomed, drugged, beaten, raped.
So they were being drugged too. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
so.
According to police, but what's disturbing about this, and it seems to be a similar aspect to the Smiley face killings, is that authorities aren't taking reports quite as seriously as they should.
Interesting.
In the case of the investigation in Telford, Daily Mail and the Daily Mirror this past weekend ran a story where they were talking about, they reported that authorities. And this was an aspect of the case in Rotherham, too, that the local council and the local police didn't want to push it because most of the suspects and the few who've been convicted all came out of the Pakistani community, whereas the vast majority of victims, over 90%, were young white girls. So there's a racial tension aspect there that they didn't want to blow up by... But sadly, because they didn't, these victims weren't helped,
And the crimes went on forever.
and the crimes went on. And so I'm wondering, is there an aspect of that in this?
It's really interesting that you brought that up because some people have considered these cases to be, because there's a strong homosexual current in them,
Right,
that you would be going after a community that...
And we don't want to look like we're intolerant.
We're not intolerant. We don't want to go. But unfortunately, within... it's both the heterosexual and gay communities. They both have a fetish component to them.
Right.
So it's kind of silly.
The aspect may be, it's not that they don't want to be intolerant. It's that we don't want to appear as though we're persecuting. Or on the flip side, I wonder if it could be, it's like, well, there's just gays. We don't really want them here anyway. So we're not really going to investigate it as hard as we might.
Well, that's a shame because not all of the victims in these cases are homosexuals. There's
Yeah.
probably 50-50. So some of the younger men are involved in Grindr, but some are just out at night. There was one guy in D.C. who was at a bar that had a bar and then a fetish BDSM bar, bondage, discipline, sadomasochism bar next door. And his brother said, we missed him. We didn't know what happened to him. He must have saw something he wasn't supposed to see. And he ended up upriver. So he ended up in the river, but upriver from where he was last seen, which doesn't make sense. So he was another example of somebody in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't want to cast any aspersions on law enforcement here because that's not always the case here. It may just be that these things just seem so implausible. I mean, as mindless and senseless as drive-by shootings are, I mean, stuff like this where somebody just disappears off the street, young, healthy, no known history of getting involved in dark activities, occult activities, anything like this, regardless of fetishism or whatever, it's difficult for police to perhaps believe that something like this could happen in their community.
I totally agree with that.
The areas where these happen, these crimes have probably been committed. I mean, right outside Boston Garden. I mean, this doesn't seem like a really a lot of college campuses. Some of the victims in the college campuses.
There's definitely a connection to college
in the upper
campuses.
Midwest. I mean, these aren't exactly considered unsafe areas.
Well, that's an interesting. You make that point too. You're making some great points because a lot of those cases involved. For example, one was Dakota James, who went to, I believe it was LaSalle in Pittsburgh,
Philadelphia.
Sorry. So somebody went to LaSalle, but there's a definitely belief that some of these cities and colleges do not want to publicize anything that would endanger the reputation of the school. So there might be a cover-up aspect of it.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no connection there. So, but there are these epicenters for these things. Minneapolis.
We can't advertise the giant great white shark out in it because the 4th of July festival's coming. So
Eau
that
Claire,
sort of
Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin.
yeah.
So all these places had these. Minneapolis had these little hot spots where this type of thing was happening. And
I remember this because, again, as I mentioned, Sharon and I stumbled onto this when we were doing PID regularly a few years back. We're back doing it regularly, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. But we never followed up on this and saw where this led or really drew any conclusions on it. But I remember Eau Claire. I've been through Eau Claire. It's a nice little town. La Crosse, Wisconsin, nice little town.
Yep.
And again, a kid at a college party, drinking to excess, not unheard of on college campuses, but still a kid who wasn't, unhappy. These kids seem to be relatively well-adjusted, well-off.
No plans of suicide.
Exactly.
Why are they drowning? If they're super healthy, why are they drowning in the water too? Which is another thing.
Well, that's the thing. They're being found in the water, but have they drowned?
Well, some of them show evidence of drowning. Not all of them, but some of them definitely do.
Okay.
And I go into that. I really focus. I think that if you look at my documentary, I really kind of go into this kind of fetish thing where there's certain people out there who like to emulate as part of their practices fake drowning people. So they literally will get a bathtub and put their head in water. And I think that that's some of the torture that I believe is taking place with some of these victims. And I think that the conclusion of my documentary, I come and bring it all together in what I think is really happening. And the conclusion involves fetishization and occultism, occult groups, and the smiley face.
What sort of occult groups might be or have practices that you're aware of that would involve this type of activity?
I'd rather save that for the documentary. But I explained it all there. I mean, that would be giving away the conclusion. But I was surprised that some of these types of behaviors do take place.
Yeah, I remember reading a case, and this was years and years ago, so I don't remember most of the details, but an investigation into a series of strange drownings, and some almost by accident, the detective figured out with the help of an assistant and a bathtub that what was going on was the person was basically suddenly grabbing the feet of the victim in the tub and pulling so that they were drawn under the water quick, because it can be really difficult to drown somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, the instinct to survive can be really, really powerful. And so unless you've got somebody who's drugged, it really takes some creativity to do somebody in that way. But you mentioned again that this GHB, a date rape type drug, was used in many of these cases. I'm just astonished at again, not all of them taking place in a club setting or a bar setting, how the drug would get into the system of somebody who is, say, coming out of a sporting event or concert or at a...
I don't believe all of them are pre-drugged. Some may be abducted in other means by other ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do, there's definitely some of them have been drugged. But I do believe that all of these deaths, to a T, these people have been murdered before they enter the water. And I think that's
so a ritual aspect of this.
There's a ritual aspect of drowning people, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a form within the occult, there isn't a form of ritual sacrifice that involves water.
They just
drowning people.
article I saw within the last month about the discovery of a new chamber beneath one of the pyramids in Mexico, and it may be the one of the main ones in Mexico City, a water-filled chamber where the bones of a lot of children were found who were sent down there. Apparently that was considered to be the entrance to the netherworld. When you go back in the history of the ancient Near East and ancient cosmology, Sumer, the god of wisdom, god of magic, god of exorcism, Enki, who was Lord of the Abyss. His temple was the Abzu, which is the word from which we get the word abyss, lived in this subterranean aqueous environment, basically the source of all fresh water that because we're talking about ancient Iraq here, the Euphrates and the Tigris were essential for life because it's mostly desert. But that's where he lived, and from where he sent forth the Apkallu, known to later Hebrews as the Watchers. That was their home, was the abyss. And so you got the Mayans of, within recorded history,
throwing people
into their equivalent of the abyss below their temple, which, like the temple of Enki and the other Sumerian gods, was shaped like a step pyramid, the ziggurat. There's a lot of coincidences here for things happening on the other side of the planet, and now here we are in the 21st century, and we're kind of looking at this, and my mind just wants to reject this and say this has got to just be just a lot of weird coincidences. But I'm not a coincidence theorist. I don't believe in coincidences.
Incredible that you brought that up, because I've talked to an ex-FBI agent by the name of D'Souza, and his conclusion is that these men are taken and kept as sacrifices to dark gods. That's what his full conclusion. And he was the one who kind of...
This is a federal agent who's saying this, not
former FBI agent.
Oh, former, okay.
So he also said that there's an immense pull to not investigate these crimes, not for a variety of reasons. One is like you don't want to have the police look bad. You don't want to have the colleges look unsafe. So he made some interesting points. You can listen to my conversation with him if anybody's interested on my YouTube channel, William Ramsey Investigates, or also Occult Investigations. So I talked to him for about an hour and a half, but I found that to be a really interesting point.
Well, that is intriguing. In fact, I noticed in the trailer for your film used a brief clip from the HBO series True Detective. First series was inspired by a crime or crimes that Sharon and I took some interest in. The child sex abuse at the Hosanna Church in Chapatulas Parish. Where the early news reports very clearly pointed out the occult symbols on the floor, the of the youth group room in this church, the fact that the windows in the youth group room had been painted over black, robes with hoods, other occult paraphernalia. So this was known to police because, again, this was in part of the early reports that came out, and yet when the case went to trial, the police dropped all of the occult ritual aspects of it and just focused on the child sex abuse. Interesting. Even though the pastor involved, so-called pastor, admitted to police that this is what had been going on. The youth group leader admitted to some of this activity, and yet they didn't want to take that into a court of law. In your research, not just for the Smiley Face Killers, but also for Abomination, for Children of the Beast, Prophet of Evil, but especially Abomination, the case involving the West Memphis Three, Damien Eccles and his accomplices. How often did you run into evidence that the police were just not wanting to touch anything that looked like a cult?
Oh, often. I mean, I think that this Smiley Face is one perfect example, but the West Memphis Three was really an issue, in my opinion. The motivation was for occult reasons. And they brought that into case. I think that the prosecutors had a lot of courage to actually do that, because the current general belief is that occultism isn't involved in any crimes. It actually goes back to the Lanning report. I actually just talked to somebody about the Lanning report who was an FBI agent, and that's bandied about by admirers of Lanning, people like John Douglas and some of these other people.
John Douglas, the FBI criminal profiler,
right.
yeah, a guy credited with starting their profiling program.
Correct. But he was involved in the West Memphis 3 case, and I think I conclusively showed that he ignored salient, very important information when he made his analysis. He was a paid expert. Anyway, I do think that there is a real push to keep the occult influences upon crimes out of the court. And in a lot of ways, I can understand that because crimes are crimes, even without the motive or intent. You can still, intent is important, whether the gravity of the crime, but if somebody commits a crime, you just want the basic facts. So it's a tough one. I think it's really more of a current social situation where people are afraid to bring this in as bringing the occult in because they think it could minimize or deflect or detract from other aspects of criminal cases.
Defense lawyers getting up there and mocking the existence. So you're telling us that these invisible gods were telling these guys what to do. Just right. In other words, get the jury distracted by that into thinking that perhaps the prosecution is not all there.
Right. Like, oh, you're kooky for thinking that Satanism is real, or satanic panic, or you're involved in something. Right. These kind of loaded terms are out there. So
how effective a cover is that for groups that are involved in this type of activity?
Excellent. That's another excellent question. I think that the people who are involved in occult activity are actively involved in naysaying occult activity to other people in the public. So I actually think that a lot of the people who are involved saying there's no such thing as Satanism or there's no such thing as cult groups are in a cult group and are Satanists.
In other words, PSYOP.
Yeah, it's a PSYOP.
Yeah. Or, well, I guess the correct term anymore is military information support, which is probably more accurate because we're in a war.
But there is a lot of mockery. There really is. It's interesting you brought that up too, because they mock the people who have actual facts or truth on their side, and they still make fun of them. Oh, you're crazy, or how can you even believe that?
Through your research, and I know we're only scratching the surface here, and again, as you say, we want to leave some information for the film for you to watch, and I'll say again the links to William's YouTube channel, his Vimeo channel, where you can find the film, The Smiley Face Killers, will be in the show notes. How much of this have you experienced in terms of pushback, and how much of it has come from these groups that you think are trying to cover up or distract from what they're actually doing?
That's a great question. I've traced back some of the commenters on my books, primarily my book about Aleister Crowley, my book about Abomination. I've actually had Damien Eccles through a fake name on Amazon. He was under Avid Reader, said, I wish I could remember the blurb, but these guys are crazy. So that's why I could say that. That's why I could say that Satanists are mocking you and saying you're crazy. And I also had another leading member of the OTO in Portland, where there's a large OTO group, do the same thing for Prophet of Evil. You don't know anything about Aleister Crowley, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And then I traced it back and I go, you have a fake magical name. Give me a break. And he's also been seen, the same guy who was on my Amazon page has been with politicians. It's remarkable.
Frater something.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was Frater. I wish I could remember his name. It's Frater. But so my personal experience has really helped me understand the situation in, from a national perspective and a global perspective.
They take this a lot more seriously than we Christians do.
They're very serious. It's not a joke.
Yeah. I've heard from somebody, and I forget where I hear this, so forgive me if you're watching or hearing this, because I thought it was a brilliant observation. No, I do remember it now. I do remember a former New Ager by the name of David Duncan, who we interviewed a few times back years ago on PID Radio. Dave Duncan, who came out of the New Age movement, met a guru in Haight-Ashbury in 1967, who he said one night about 2 a.m., literally transformed into a being of light and said, I am Lucifer. Wow. You can find that interview at PIDradio.com. If you just do a search in the search box for David Duncan, you'll find that. It was phenomenal. That's Dave is a very rational guy. He was a chemist by trade, and so productive citizen. He got saved and came out of that, but he had some insight that most of us don't have. You know, like Russ Dizdar came out of Eastern mysticism, but he said that the people who he was in contact with back in that, you know, San Francisco scene in 67, the Summer of Love, said that they view Christians as practitioners of a very weak form of magic. And it's weak because we don't really believe in it. In other words, they think that what we're doing when we pray is performing magic spells. But because we don't really believe it and we're praying for, you know, wimpy stuff like, safe travel mercies or, you know, things like that. Right. And not that there's anything wrong with praying that way, but they view it as a war in which only one side really believes that there's a war, and the other side is just sort of play acting and going through the motions, and that's why our magic is so weak. That's kind of the analysis that Dave said he heard from those who were in the occult when he was practicing. It seems to me that this reinforces that worldview, that those who are serious about this, practicing the occult, are using every trick in the book to convince us, well, like the old saying, Baudelaire, you know, quoted in the film The Usual Suspects, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled is convincing the world he doesn't exist. Exactly. And his minions are out there doing the same thing. Oh, you think that Satan's real? Why are you crazy? Right. Pass another, you know, cup of goat's blood. Right. It is disturbing, and I shouldn't make light of it by joking, because again, we've got 100 victims of crimes that are unsolved. Yeah.
Well, they're not even considered crimes. They're supposedly accidental drowning. So that's even the predicate.
What?
Yeah.
I should have brought that up early on. Wow.
Yeah, so they're not even considered crimes. So that's the whole thing. They're just written off.
So you've got 100 families here who are being told by authorities that your son just got drunk and fell into a canal?
Yeah. Or confused, or they scratched their head. Really, one of the turning points was the Joey LeBeau case, where the cops actually said publicly, we don't think he was in the water the whole time he was missing. And that was about 2 years ago. That was the Columbus, Ohio one. So it's a really serious, and I'd just like to warn the listeners.
So guys were missing for like 39 days, and he was just missing for 39 days, just confused.
Yeah. Oh, they don't have an explanation. And I believe my documentary explains what's going on. But I do want to just put a general warning out to the listeners and people to really watch out. Just because you're a man doesn't mean you're safe. And there are, I believe, individuals and groups who seek young men for very dark purposes. And you don't want to be the victim. And you want to tell your family and friends to don't take drinks from other people. Women know the security and safety precautions, but men don't seem to know. So don't take the beer. I got tons of stories about guys who said, I was at a bar, some strange person came up to me. 15 minutes later, I got offered a beer. I don't remember anything else. So this does happen to men.
Well, and the person I was talking about earlier, similar situation.
Yeah.
Someone who works in the hospitality industry and knows not to do this.
So it's really got to really, really be careful.
Yeah.
It's really serious. And the families are destroyed. They've lost a loved one at the prime of their life, people with a future.
And it's like ripples on a pond, because when that happens to a family, then the questions begin. How can a loving God let something like this happen to our boy?
Our boy, yeah. And evildoers. That's the explanation. People who willfully, in a joking manner, commit crimes.
Well, the film is The Smiley Face Killers. It's available for rent or for download at Vimeo. And again, the link will be in the show notes, VFTB.net or YouTube.com/Derek Gilbert. If you're watching this on a video, just check the notes below, and I'll have a link there to the film. Also a link to William's website, where you can find out more about his books, Abomination, Devil Worship and Deception, and the West Memphis 3 Murders. It is highly documented with information taken right from the trial transcripts. I read the book. Go back, and I'll put a link to the interview, in fact, because if you're not familiar with the Damien Eccles case and the West Memphis 3 Murders, and how, after reading the book, you come away with the conclusion I did, that they got away with murder, and how Hollywood came to his
Hollywood occultist Satanists, right? Who aren't involved in anything.
Yeah,
not networked.
Yeah, not networked. Nothing happening. Move along, citizen. Nothing to see here. Came to his aid and produced a documentary. Got him pardoned from prison, didn't he?
He's still under probation, so he's still.
But he's not. But he's not in prison.
He's not in prison.
Yeah,
he was out in 2011.
Children of the Beast, Aleister Crowley's Shadow over Humanity, Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order. Aleister Crowley shows up in the book Josh Peck and I just wrote about the UFO phenomenon, how ancient aliens can be traced back to theosophy and telema filtered through H.P. Lovecraft. That's where Eric von Daniken got the stew that he used to create Chariots of the Gods. William, just fascinating conversation, awesome. Disturbing, but I sure appreciate it.
It's an honor to be here with you and be here in person. It's awesome.
There's a link in the show notes below this video or audio, wherever you're watching or listening, to where you can watch the Smiley Face Killers on Vimeo. And I'll put a link in the notes to William's website as well, where you can follow his work in general. Again, his research into the dark side of human society, the occult especially. Important, not pleasant, but not a subject that we should shy away from. Spiritual warfare is real, and as our friend Carl Gallup says, it's a little more intense than just avoiding, passing up that second bowl of vanilla ice cream. There are evil intelligences out there who want to do us harm. Coming up, we'll tell you more about our tour of Israel and our special guest and another episode of Bless Their Pointy Little Heads. Straight ahead on A View from the Bunker. Thousands of years ago, giants walked the earth. They are long gone, but their spirits remain. The evidence is there for those with eyes to see. Megalithic tombs, monuments aligned with the stars, and the words of the prophets and apostles recorded in Scripture. Now, see this evidence for yourself as Derek and Sharon Gilbert take you on a tour of the Holy Land with special guests Pastor Carl Gallups and Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat. From the mountain where the story began to the mountain where it all ends. Wars of the Gods, Volume 2, Search for the Rephaim. Available now in DVD and HD streaming video. Online at gilberthouse.org. Driving the internet to think from the crossroads of the Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us at VFTB.net. That's our website, global hub, as we continue our goal of slow but steady world domination on social media at View from Bunker on Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter at Derek Gilbert. Facebook, View from the Bunker, and Truth Social, Gab Me We Get It Parlor at Derek P. Gilbert. On YouTube, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gilbert House. We appreciate you subscribing, and down here, I think, right? And clicking the bell for notifications. But please get our free app, because you never know. If you're watching on YouTube, the day may come where they decide that we just crossed the line, violated community standards once too often, and well, our app gets you all of our content. This weekly program, our weekly broadcast program, Unraveling Revelation, our podcast, PID Radio, Peering into Darkness. That's the show Sharon and I started back in 2005 that led to all of what we do today. And, of course, our weekly Bible study, updated every Sunday, midday, the Gilbert House Fellowship. All of that brought into your smartphone or tablet, whether it's iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire phone or tablet. In fact, we've also got Roku and Apple TV versions of this. You'll find the link at the website, VFTB.net, or go to gilberthouse.org/app and get that app. Protect yourself against being cut off from all of the stuff that is coming out of our house. And I mean, literally coming out of our house. We thank you, by the way, for those of you who has contributed to our Build Barn Better plan. This is a tweak on the slogan of the World Economic Forum. We've got a 1,200 square foot pole barn that came with the property when we bought out here in the Ozarks 8 years ago. We didn't go looking for a building, a home with an outbuilding, but it was what was available. The location is good. Manufactured home, good bones, the floor plan inside fit our needs, and so here we are. But that 30 by 40 foot building is used basically just for storage to this point. We're in the process, now that we're back from Israel, of cleaning it out so that we can begin the process of turning it into usable space, so that at some point, rather than being in here, which should be a guest bedroom, I'll be out there and working in a space that's a little more suited for this kind of thing. Anyway, Many of you have contributed, and we truly, truly appreciate it. If you'd like to help us to build Barn better, well, we appreciate that too. And you'll find a link at vftb.net or gilberthouse.org/donate. We've also got a streaming video site, by the way. If you're interested in any of our teachings, all of our DVDs are available there to stream, but we've got individual teachings and presentations that you can access for as little as $3 at our streaming video site. That's gilberthouse.org/video. Ford has invented a new, patented a new device to repossess your car. This is where AI-powered self-driving vehicles are going in the future. The Drive spotted this back in March. This patent was originally submitted by Ford in 2021. It is titled Systems and Methods to Repossess a Vehicle and was published by the U.S. Patent Office in March. Now, it hadn't been approved as of then, but it is coming. The system described in the Ford patent is, capable of disabling different functions in the vehicle, basically setting tiers of inconvenience for people who miss payments on their cars. According to the patent, it first could disable the power windows, lock you out of parts of your infotainment system. If that doesn't get your attention, get you to get current on your auto loan, you'll lose your air conditioning, which I can tell you here in the Ozark, July, August, you don't want that. And then you could lose the ability to automatically lock and unlock your doors. But then, if you still haven't paid up, the car could begin playing an incessant and unpleasant sound, according to the patent, every time you enter, and eventually it may lock you out entirely. Now, that is all prelude to the ultimate. Of course, if the car is someday equipped with autonomous driving capabilities, Ford's system could drive your car to a different location so as to avoid a possible confrontation between you and the repo man. Think about that. And take that a step further now. This is not in the patent, but take this a step further and imagine how this might be useful to law enforcement. Oh, yes, you have an outstanding warrant for your arrest. We're just going to commandeer your vehicle and drive you to the nearest police station for your own security, of course. This is why I do, one of the reasons, not that I do things that would get me in trouble with the law, but look, I don't want a computer controlling the vehicle, first of all. Secondly, I don't want a computer which, if it has access to the internet, is hackable. And I don't want it having autonomous driving capabilities connected to the internet, which makes it hackable and steerable by somebody else. Call me old-fashioned. I'm not getting it. Does Ford intend to follow through with this patent? We don't know. At this point, Ford is reportedly not even pursuing self-driving technology at this point, to which we say, bless their pointy little heads. Well, speaking of teachings and presentations, got a couple of virtual conferences available right now or very, very soon. The Hear the Watchman Conference, Overcoming Deception. I've got a presentation in there on the cult of Molech. Not a fun topic, but I think an important one. There is a spirit that has inspired humans for literally thousands of years to slaughter our children. And they're managing to do it even in the 21st century. A lot of people who don't even believe that such entities exist. Number one cause of death in the world, though. You can see that and much, much more at the Hear the Watchman virtual conference, Overcoming Deception. Other speakers include Dr. Mike Spalding, Carl Teichribb, Jamie Walden, Tom Dunn, Vicki Joy Anderson, Mark Sutherland, Kenny C., and others. Online information and registration at hearthewatchmen.com. Skywatch TV's virtual conference, it goes live on the 21st, so that is coming up very, very quickly. So sign up soon. My presentation for this one is on the World Economic Forum's Great Reset Initiative. It's titled Build Back Babel, because that's really what they're trying to do, whether they recognize it or not. Not better, it's Babel. That's what they're trying. They're trying to take us back to the kingdom of Nimrod, and I explain why. Of course, Dr. Tom Horn, and Carl Gallups, many, many others. Information, list of speakers, and registration at defenderconference.com. We're going back to Israel next spring, God willing. The dates for the 2024 Gilbert House Tour of Israel, March 30th through April 9th of 2024, and our special guest is Timothy Alberino. This will be a rolling conference through the Holy Land, and we hope and pray that you will join us. We're excited to show you what we've learned, and in the months ahead, we'll be sharing some video of places that we've seen here in recent weeks. You can find out more at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel, gilberthouse.org/travel, and join us and the Alberinos in Israel. Our tour of Turkey, we are looking at rescheduling those dates because the infrastructure in many of the areas that we wanted to see in the south and east of Turkey just absolutely obliterated by the massive earthquake. So as soon as we can find out from the tour companies working on the ground, and I'm sure that they are scrambling to try to figure out when hotels, roads, restaurants, and so forth will be available again for tourists. They will let us know, and we will let you know. But that is something we do intend to make happen, and we look forward to sharing that with you and getting over to Turkey and seeing Göbekli Tepe with our own eyes, the churches of Revelation, the gates of hell outside Pergamum. Much more. Yeah, literally. There's a place called the Plutonion, as in Pluto, the god of the underworld. That was on the list. But we will wait and see. The Turks need to rebuild. They've got to take care of their people before they can start welcoming tourists back. So just keep an eye on our website, gilberthouse.org/travel. Again, get our free mobile app. And if you get a spare moment, leave a review for us at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And give us a thumbs up, a like on our Facebook page. Our announcer is the inimitable DC Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0. 4.0. International license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.